Good morning. Today we are going to start a new chapter which is equilibrium. What's meant by equilibrium? Equilibrium means the intersection of demand and supply, or in other words, the point at which the consumer and producer would like to buy and sell the product at the same price. Would like to buy and sell the same quantity at the same price. So equilibrium occurs at the intersection of the market demand and the market supply curves. At this point, quantity demanded will be equal to quantity supplied. And by definition, quantity demanded is the number of units consumers would like to buy at each price level. So the quantity is accompanied by a certain price level. The same with respect to quantity supplied. It is the quantity or number of units that producers would like to sell at each price level. So each quantity is accompanied by a certain price level. So let's take an example. This is the price, quantity demanded, and the quantity supplied for a specific product. So at price 0, the number of units demanded by the consumers is 900, while the number of units producers would like to sell is 0. At price 2, the number of units consumers would like to buy is 800, and the number of units producers would like to sell is 100, and so on. So we would like to find the point at which consumers would like to buy a certain quantity at a specific price, which is equivalent to the number of units producers would like to sell at a certain price. They should be equal to each other. This can be found at price 9. At price 9, quantity demanded is for 150 and the quantity supplied is for 150. So this is the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. This can be illustrated graphical as this is quantity and the price. At price 0, quantity demanded is 900, 2, 800, 4, 700, and so on. So this is the demand curve. It's negatively sloped, as we said before, that there is a negative relationship between price and the quantity demanded. Now we are going to draw the supply curve on the same figure. So at price 0 it is 0, so we are going to start from the origin. At price 2 it's 100, and so on. So this is the supply curve, point of intersection of demand of supply, and supply is equilibrium at 450 and 9. So this is the graphical illustration of equilibrium. Equilibrium is the point of intersection of demand curve and supply curve. What about any point above or below the equilibrium price? Let's take the price 4, for example. At price 4, quantity demanded is 700, while the quantity supplied is 2. So quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, and this is known as shortage in the market or excess demand. So what is shortage or excess demand? Shortage means that quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, so there is a shortage in the products supplied in the market. We would like to buy more than the supplied quantity. So if you would like to identify by how much, the shortage by how much is the difference between QD and the QS. So in our example, QD is 700 and the QS is 200. So if you would like to identify shortage by how many units, it's gonna be 700 minus 200, 500. So there is a shortage of 500 units. So in order to make it more general, any price below the equilibrium price there is a shortage in the market. Okay, graphical. At price 4, this is the quantity demanded at point A, and this is the quantity supplied at point B. As can be noticed that A is greater than B, or quantity A is greater than quantity B, so there is a shortage in the market. What about at a price higher than the equilibrium price? Say for example 12. At price 12, quantity demanded is 300 and the quantity supplied is 600. This means that there is a surplus in the market or excess supply. So there is surplus or excess supply. Surplus or excess supply exists when QS is greater than QD. So in our example, QD is 300 and the QS is 600. 600 QS and the QD 300. So if you would like to find by how much it is the difference between QD and the QS, so it will be by 300. So there is a surplus or excess supply. Number of units exceeds demand by 300 units. Sorry, I have a problem with the tablet. Okay, at price 12, it can be noticed that quantity supplied is at point C, quantity demanded is at point C, while quantity supplied is at point D, and the D is greater than C, so there is an excess supply or there is a surplus. Now we have to find equilibrium mathematical. As we have illustrated demand and supply laws using words, graphical, schedule, and mathematical, we have to do the same with respect to equilibrium. Equilibrium, by words, it's the point of intersection of demand and supply, or quant demanded equals quant supplied. Schedule, as shown in this schedule, at the point at which QD equals QS, and graphical at the point of intersection of demand and supply. Now we would like to illustrate it mathematically. As we said before, that QD equals A minus PP, and the QS equals C plus DP. And the equilibrium means that QD equals the QS. So we are going to substitute using the two equations in QD and QS. So it's A minus PP equals C plus DP. This is gonna be moved to the other side with opposite sign, and this is gonna be moved to the other side with opposite sign. So it's A minus C equals dP plus PP we are going to take B as the common factor, so it's A minus C equals B plus D P. Now we are going to divide the whole equation by B plus D. So equilibrium price will be calculated as A minus C divided by B plus D. This is the equilibrium price. Okay, let's take an example. QD equals 100 minus 5P, and the QS equals 20 plus P. Required is to find the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. Equilibrium, as we said, is going to be achieved when QD equals the QS. So it's 100 minus 5P equal 20 plus P. It's 100 minus 20 equals 5P plus P. So it's 80 equals 6P. So equilibrium price, it's 80 over 6. Is 13.33. Now in order to find the equilibrium quantity, so we have to substitute in QD or QS in order to find the equilibrium quantity. So if you are going to substitute in QD, it's 100 minus Q star or asterisk. Asterisk means equilibrium quantity. Instead of writing equilibrium quantity, equilibrium price, we are going to add the star at the top as a power. Okay, 100 minus 5P, which is 13.33. So it will be 33.33. If you are going to substitute in QS, it will be the same, 20 plus P, which is 13.33. So it will be 33.33. So this is the equilibrium quantity using mathematical illustration. It changes in equilibrium condition. This means that equilibrium price and the quantity or quantity, it change when the market demand or market supply, it curve shifts. As we said in law of demand, ceteris paribus, or keep other factors constant, and then we have illustrated what are the factors that affect demand or shift the demand curve to the left or to the right, and we did the same for supply. These factors will affect equilibrium. So let's assume that this is the initial situation, Q and P, demand and supply. This is equilibrium quantity at Q star and P star. Now let's assume that there is a change in demand. There is an increase in income and the commodity is normal. Income is one of the factors that affect the demand. As the commodity is normal, this means that as income increases, demand will increase and demand curve will shift to the right. So this is the new demand curve, and the other result, we have new equilibrium point at Q double star and B double star. This means that as income increases, demand curve will shift to the right and the equilibrium quantity will increase from Q star to Q double star, and the equilibrium price is going to increase as well from B star to B double star. Case number 2. This is the initial situation. This is demand and supply. Point of intersection is point of equilibrium at Q star and P star. Now let's assume that one of the factors that affect supply has caused a shift in the supply curve. Say, for example, cost of production decreased. To be more precise, let's assume that wages, there is a decrease in the wage rate. A decrease in wage rate or a decrease in cost of production will shift the supply curve to the right, as suppliers can produce more. So supply curve will shift to the right and we have new intersection point or equilibrium point at Q double star and B double star. So as supply curve increase or shift to the right, equilibrium quantity will increase from Q star to Q double star and the equilibrium price will decrease from B star to B double star. Case number 3. This is the initial situation. Now let's assume that there is a change in demand and supply at the same time. So let's combine cases 1 and 2 together. An increase in income and a decrease in wages or a decrease of cost of production. So in this case, demand curve will shift to the right and supply curve will shift to the right as well. So we have new intersection point for the two new curves. The change in price in this case will depend on the magnitude of a change of demand curve and supply curve. This is take the same example. This is Q and P, and this is demand, and this is supply. Point of intersection is point of equilibrium at Q star and P star. Now let's assume that demand increase and supply increase as well. So demand curve shifted to the right and supply curve shifts to the right as well. In this case, it's smaller quantity or smaller change in supply than demand. So it can be noticed that quantity will increase in both cases. But with respect to price, in this case, it's going to increase. But in case number one, there is no change in price level. So the final effect in case of a change of demand and supply at the same time depends on the magnitude. By how much demand will shift to the right or to the left, and by how much supply will shift to the right or to the left, whether they are equal to each other or not. We have two exception cases with respect to prices. As we said that generally prices are determined based on market forces or interaction between demand and supply, and the point of intersection is point of equilibrium. But in some cases there is government intervention which will affect the price level, as the government would like to keep or to put limits, upper limit and lower limit for the price level, or the government can intervene in the market by taxes or subsidies, something like that. So let's take case number one. This is applications of price theory. Case number one, putting upper limit or set an upper limit for selling the product. So in this case, the government doesn't provide subsidies to producer. So the producer will not be motivated to produce more. So this is the initial situation. Let's start with the initial situation. And this is the market price, equilibrium. And this is the equilibrium quantity. Let's assume that the government would like to set a price, upper limit price at this level. So in this case, producers are not going to produce anymore. But with respect to the consumers, they can buy a product at a lower price than the equilibrium price in the market. price, the demand curve should be at this level. But actually, this is the demand curve. So there is excess supply in, excess demand in this case. Which is the difference between demand and supply. So there is excess demand. So, okay, let's mention it or summarize it once again. Initially, this is the demand curve, which is DD, and this is the supply curve, which is S, and the equilibrium point is E, and the equilibrium price is B star. But the government would like to set the price at a lower price level than the equilibrium price at the upper limits. So at this price level, producers would like to sell this quantity at point A, for example, and consumers would like to buy at point B. So there is an excess demand in this case. Case number 2. The government is going to set a lower price, not an upper price. Let's start with the initial situation. This is Q, B, equilibrium, D, and S. This is the equilibrium point at B star, and this is the equilibrium quantity. Now the government is going to set the price above the equilibrium price. This is the lower limit. So in this case, quantity supplied is much more than greater quantity demanded, as quantity supplied is at point A and quantity demanded is at point B. So there is excess supply or surplus. Okay, now let's take an example in order to summarize what we have mentioned in this chapter. Okay, if you are given the following table showing the demand and supply of economics books at different prices. This is the different price levels: 50, 100, 120, 150, and 200. And this is number of units demanded, and this is of number of units supplied. Number A, show the equilibrium graphically. So this is number A. We are going to start from 100, and this is the smallest number, and end at 600. And with respect to prices, it's 250. Okay, so the demand curve is 60 for 50 at price 50, it's 600. At price 100, it's 450. At 120, it's 350. At 120, it's 350, and so on. So this is the demand curve. And we have to do the same with respect to supply. At 50 it's 200, at 100 it's 300, at 50 it's 100, at 100 it's 300, and so on. So this is the supply curve. Equilibrium will be achieved at the point of intersection of demand and supply, or when QD equals QS, so at 100, at price 120. So this is the equilibrium price and the quantity at 350 and 120. So this is number A. Number B, at what prices there will be equilibrium, surplus, or shortage in the market? At these different price levels, we would like to identify at each point whether there is an equilibrium or surplus or shortage. Or let it be more general, at any price lower than the equilibrium price, it will be shortage or surplus, and at any price higher than, it will be shortage or surplus, and so on. So let's add one more column. At price 50, quantity demanded is 600 and the quantity supplied is 200. So there is excess demand or shortage. At price 100, 450 and 300. So excess demand by 150 or shortage. At 120, 350 and 350, which means that there is equilibrium. At 150, quant demanded is 250 and the quant supplied is 400. So there is surplus or excess supply. At price 200, quant demanded is 100 and the quantity supplied is 500. So there is an excess supply of 400 or there is a surplus. So at what prices there will be equilibrium? At price 120, surplus 150 and 200, or any price greater than 120, shortage 50 and 100, or any price lower than 120. Suppose the current market price of an economics book is 150. Is there shortage or surplus in the market, and by how much? At 150, quant demanded is 250 and the quantity supplied is 400, and as we said that there is a surplus by the difference between QD and the QS, which is 150. So there is a surplus by 150 units. Now suppose that the price of paper decreases. Paper is an input used in the production of books. Price of paper decreased. So this means that cost of production decreased. Cost of production is one of the factors that affect the supply. As cost of production decreased, supply will increase. Will increase by how much? Will increase by 150 at each price level. So we have to find the new supply curve. New supply. New supply is the old supply plus 150 at each price level. So at price 50, quant supplied was 200. Now we are going to add 150, so it will be 350. 300, it will be 450. 350, it will be 500. 550, and finally 650. As a result, supply changes by 150 at each price level while demand remains constant. This means that there is no change in the demand curve. What will be the new equilibrium price and the quantity? Show your steps. Equilibrium, new equilibrium. As we said that equilibrium is the point at which QD equals QS. So now we have to neglect the old supply curve. And we have to compare quantity demanded and the new quantity supplied. 600 and 350, 450 and 450. So they are equivalent to each other. So this is the new equilibrium quantity. The new equilibrium quantity is 450 and the new equilibrium price is 100. Show your answers, show your steps. This is your steps and you have to illustrate this graphical. So we have to draw the new supply curve. At price 50 it's 350 and at price 100 it's 450. At price 50 it is 350 and at price 100 it's 450. So this is the new supply curve at the new equilibrium price, which is 100 and 450. Okay. This is the end of this problem. Now let's take another example using mathematical notation instead of a schedule or graphs. This is QD. Okay. Q equals 100 minus 10p and Q equals 30 plus 5p. Q equals 100 minus 10b. So this means that this is the demand function. And Q equals 30 plus 5b. So it's a positive relationship. So this is the supply function. From this sign, we have identified whether this is the demand function or the supply function. Number 1, calculate the equilibrium price and the quantity of cookies and illustrate the equilibrium point on a graph. QD equals 180 minus 10b and the QS equals 30 plus 5b. As we said, that equilibrium will be achieved at the point of intersection of demand and supply, or at the point when QD equals QS. Then we have to substitute using 180 minus 10b instead of QD and 30 plus 5b instead of QS. So it's 180 minus 30 plus 10b minus plus 5b. It's 150 equals 15b. So b equals 10. This is the equilibrium price. Equilibrium quantity. We are going to substitute in QD or QS in order to find the equilibrium quantity. It will be 30 plus 5 multiplied by 10, which is 80. So equilibrium price is 10 and equilibrium quantity is 80. To illustrate this graphical, this is Q and B. This is 180. This is demand and this is 30. This is supply, this is 30 and this is 180, okay? Point of intersection is point of equilibrium at 80 and 10. So this is requirement number 1. Requirement number 2. Suppose that the current market price is 7. Will there be excess supply or excess demand in the market and by how much? In order to identify whether there is excess supply or excess demand, we have to find the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied and compare them together in order to identify which one of them is greater than the other. Okay, so QD equals 180 minus 10b and the QS equal 30 plus 5b at price 7. So we have to substitute in QD and the QS by 7 to find quantity demanded and the quantity supplied. So QD will be 180 minus 10 multiplied by 7 and the QS will be 30 plus 5 multiplied by 7. So this is 110 and this is 65. Now we have to compare QD and QS, which one of them is greater than the other. We can find that QD is greater than QS by how much? QD is greater than QS by 110 minus 65. It's 55. So in this case, as QD is greater than QS, this means that there is excess demand or shortage in the market by 55. Shortage by 55. Now let's assume that cost of production decreased, and as a result, supply will change by 20 at each price level. What is the new equilibrium price and the quantity? Once again, cost of production decreased. As a result, supply will change by 20 at each price level. What is the new equilibrium price and the quantity? Cost of production is one of the factors that affect supply, which means that there is no change in demand. So demand function will be the same. QD equals 180 minus 10p, while QS equal, this is the old one, plus 5p. And now cost of production decreased, which means that supply is going to increase. By how much? By 20 at each price level. So this means that we are going to change the intercepts. So the new supply function will be 30 plus 20 plus 5p plus 20, which is the change that occurs due to a decrease in the cost of production. If there is an increase in cost of production, it will be minus instead of plus. So if the factor is going to increase supply or demand, so it's going to be plus sign. If it's going to decrease these variables, so it's going to be minus sign. So now we have a new supply function, which is 50 plus 5p. Now we have to find the equilibrium price and the quantity. Equilibrium will be achieved when QD equals QS. So it will be 180 minus 10b equals 50 plus 5b. So it's 130 equals 15b. So b will be 8.67. Now we have to substitute in QD or new QS in order to find the equilibrium quantity. So it's 180 minus 10 multiplied by 8.67. So it's 93.33. To illustrate this graphical, there is no change in the demand curve. Supply curve will shift to the right, so the intercept will be 50 instead of 30. So this is the new supply curve. And the equilibrium price is going to decrease to 8.67. And the equilibrium quantity is going to increase to 93.33. This is the end of our lecture today. Thank you and see you next week.